Good evening, Nam, and welcome to the 5th Indigenous Oration at Deakin University. It's great to have you here, and on a very cold night outside, it's good to come in and warm ourselves with culture and joy. And we'll start off proper way by inviting Daniel to come and welcome us to his country.
Thank you. My name's Daniel Ross, and I'm a proud Wurundjeri man, and I'm humbled to be here with you tonight. But I want to take the opportunity to share a little bit of my truth, my ancestors' truth with you all. And Bunjil is our creator, the wedge-tailed eagle. Bunjil created everything we see, from the stars in the sky to the roots of the trees in the ground. Those roots of the trees intertwine through one another, sharing resource, just like we share knowledge from old to young. Bunjil taught us how to listen and how to care. But it's 2026. What does that mean? And for those that are 21 like me, you'll recall growing up where we were told, you've got 2 ears but 1 mouth. So we listen twice as much as we talk. But I've learnt that listening is more than those 2 ears. It's the feeling in our stomach, it's the people beside us, it's the vibrations under our feet, the birrarung flowing past behind us, seeing the wattle coming to bloom and pausing and checking on our old people, those knowledge holders, those libraries that are alive. Because when the wattle blooms, they join the dreaming. Listening encompasses every essence of who we are as a being. I mentioned the birrarung. It runs through country like the blood in our veins, providing life and resource. The MCG, not too far from here, was once a place of song, dance, ceremony, tandarum. And we'd come together with our neighbours, the Bunurong to the south, Wadawurrung to the southwest, Dja-Dja-Wurrung to the north, Gunai-Kurnai to the east, home. We were forced off home to a place they called Corranderk. And Corranderk was one of the most profitable reserves of the day. But who was it profitable for? We weren't allowed to speak our native tongue. We had to learn to read and write English before it'd be forwarded a meal, let alone a paycheck. Uncle William Barak and Uncle Billabilary, Uncle Simon Wonga, they advocated tirelessly at Corranderk, not just for First Nations, but for all of us. That knowledge they had to share would benefit generations well beyond our time. And for those of you who want to see Uncle Barak, he's just in the NGV. There's an amazing portrait of him. Or if you visit the shrine and you look towards Carlton, you'll see Uncle Barak's face standing over 30 stories tall, still overlooking home. He gave my great-grandmother the tribal name Bulum, and Nam was gentle. She was caring. The old people have a way of knowing, a way of guiding. And Nam would be instrumental in opening what we now know as VARS, the first Victorian Aboriginal Health Service, which opened just over 50 years ago. But Nan's story and my story aren't so dissimilar, because she wasn't allowed to play with coloured kids or Anglo kids. She was Aboriginal and fair skin. My first day of school, I wanted to share stories of Bunjil, our creator, Wah the crow would bring us fire. And I was told I wasn't Aboriginal because I was fair skin. And I went home questioning who I was. And my family lied to me. Who was I? And my grandfather, one of our senior elders, he sat me down and we're overlooking the Koroi Creek. And he brought me back to Bunjil's law. And I ask you all to hold this at the forefront, because when we get the balance right, we don't thrive. We don't survive, we thrive. But it was how we listen, how we care, and how we come together collectively as one. And I mentioned deep listening, and this report didn't come together by not embracing those laws on how we listen and how we care right from the very beginning. And it's something that we do in everything that we do. At the moment, I'm working hard to help try to protect our cultural places, but more and more development sees less and less of our cultural places for all of us to enjoy. So please listen tonight with everything that you are and do it respectfully and take away that opportunity that is being presented on how we can come together collectively as one. I want to pay respects to my elders past and present. I want to pause. I want to pay my respects to each and every one of you. I want to acknowledge your elders past and present also, and to all the community joining us tonight and the elders. Nungojin, thank you for coming. Woman Jika Arundri Bulak, Yemen Kundibek. In the Woiwurrung language, I just said welcome to the traditional lands of the Arundri people. Nungojin.
Daniel, thank you very much for that welcome to country. And every time you welcome us, we feel warmth and we feel secure, knowing that we walk upon your land softly and with purpose. So, and I love the word Wamanjika, which means welcome, but come with purpose. Come and be awesome, be deadly. And you certainly were tonight. So, Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, elders, council members, members of the Vice-Chancellor Indigenous Advisory Committee, and community and colleagues, welcome to the fifth oration. This oration has been a very special program in the life cycle of Deakin University, and it's great to have you here. I can't see the audience, but I see very few empty chairs, which I see at other orations. They have plenty of empty chairs. Thank you for coming to the Deakin one. I know that we've got a whole lot of people from the education department here, so big welcome. And also a whole lot of people from Big Pole, so security's right too, so welcome. We've got a whole lot of people. Monica, it's great to have you here. I haven't seen you for a long time, but your fight for land and for is immense. It's great to have you here. Tanya Peel, I saw you out there, principal of Warra College in Hillsville, doing her ancestors' work. Great to have you here, Tanya. And John Evans from Swinburne University. We don't want to publicise another university, but brother, it's good to have you here. But we do have a couple of apologies, and one that thought the night wasn't going to go very well at all. So Pauline Hanson and Barnaby Joyce have suggested that we're taking the notion of monoculture to the extreme, and said they wouldn't come because of that. Anyway, you are very welcome. Let me put that on the workshop list too. I need to workshop that joke a bit more. So I get it. It's a dad joke, Meg, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, got the message. I've got a very important task to do now. I want to acknowledge someone who's very important in my life, in my cultural journey. 31 years ago, I became the principal of the Koori Outdoor Education Project in Glenroy, the Code School, and I had a couple of really awesome Aboriginal leaders that worked with me. As principal, I thought I ran the school, but no, it's my cousins. So Brando and, of course, Kutcha. And I've wanted Kutcha to perform at this oration for many times. Kutcha, love you to death, cuz. You are a rock in my life, and the work you do in prisons, in community with young people is immense. You can always tell a deadly elder by the way kids flock to them. So, Kutcha, I'm going to hand over to you, cuz, all right?
My spirit goes back, Mark. 31 years ago. Yeah, education is an interesting beast. Culturally, we would educate our kids at home, on country. Now we send them to this place down the road and we hand them over to what are called educators, tutorers, teachers, principals. And we send them on that journey to be educated. It's an interesting concept. But for me, my journey is about relationships, not hierarchical. And our elders are our teachers, are our educators. And beyond them are the old people up there. And when we talk about deep listening in Yorta Yorta, Gulpanyawo, deep listening, not just with the ear, but your whole being. And I've learnt a lot, not only in the 31 years that I've known you, Cuz, but I was learning in those places far away from my entire family, in an institution, children's homes. I was still learning of my brothers and my sisters. I've learnt one of my languages, Mati Mati, song called Ngarli-Wangu. Ngarli-Wangu, in one of my languages, the Mati Mati language, our song. Imagine 100-piece orchestra, the Sydney Symphony, at the biggest concert hall in the Southern Hemisphere. This little black duck, who is now a big black goose, sang with the Sydney Symphony in that hall. World, world, Males, Males. Together, we will sing our song. Phoebe Ellsworth. Not one person applauded. That's strange. Phoebe Ellsworth. Jay Jerome. Oh, they like you, Jay.
I got it straight.
Young G'day. Why To speak. Let us speak, our own speak. English is a foreign language to this place. Education is about holistic learning. Woman Jika, thank you for that too. Daniel, thank you. Our song. They've asked me to sing too. I'll do anything for my cuz. To understand where I've been or understand why I'm here, you need to understand where I've come from. I was born on the Murrumbidgee in 1965, born not a citizen of this place. I will lay my hat on that knowledge. I will go to sleep when that time comes, knowing that I am sovereign, mati mati, yorta yorta, nari nari. I'm satisfied with that. Admittedly, I carry an Australian passport, but I was not born an Australian citizen. That hurts, but it is what it is. And I've learnt from them old people. It's sad, but it is my truth. I know where I'm going. Stay beside me, help me through the night. What is our future? Is it within sight? Let's stand together and unite. Tomorrow, are we gonna be alright?
Go ahead, let the doubters have their say. Will you guide me to a brighter day? We will overcome when skies are gray. For the sun will rise on a brand new day. Ooh,
into a world I've never seen. Gonna wash my soul, keep my spirit clean. I know where I'm going, I sure know where I've been. Every morning I wake up from that same dream into a world I've never seen. Gonna wash my soul, keep my spirit clean. I know where I'm going, I sure know where I've been. I know where I'm going, I sure know where I've been. I know where I'm going, I sure know where I've been. I went to the BMW Edge, to the social justice oration. Like I said before, what I do is based on relationships, cuz I got this from, I have family who are not biological. Through the dreaming, through the law, what makes us us is our connection. This painting is from one of my family in Pupanya. This is a painting from Herman Corby, Japajimpa Fire, and it's for you, my dear cousin, for all you do. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Love you too.
Yeah. Yeah. Love you, cuz.
Kutcha, very few times am I lost for words, but I am lost for words now. Thank you, cuz. And Kutcha's songs reach us right into our souls and our spirits. And we come to this grand cause of change many ways, through education, through politics, through whatever. But Kutcha's words and his melodies really have brought about change in my life and many others. So Kutcha, thank you very much. It is now my extreme pleasure to welcome to the stage Caretaker Vice-Chancellor Matthew Clark. Matthew, you've always been a great ally of our work. It's great working with you, and thank you for all you do and the leadership you're showing at the moment. So Matthew, come to the stage, please.
So it's my very great pleasure on behalf of our Chancellor, Mrs Claire Higgins, to welcome you all to this 5th annual Indigenous Oration. This oration was established 5 years ago to promote and celebrate First Nations perspectives. The University's strategic plan expresses our commitment to ensuring Indigenous knowledges are widely recognised and woven into the fabric of Australian life. Our Indigenous strategy describes reconciliation as a guiding principle with a focus on truth-telling, respect and cultural safety. Likewise, our Indigenous research strategy, which was launched earlier this year, draws on our long and distinguished history of Indigenous-led and focused research. All of these 3 documents codify Deakin University's ongoing commitment to Indigenous education and the support of truth-telling in Indigenous affairs. They represent our pledge to stand in solidarity and amplify voices that have long been silenced. Now, before introducing our speaker, I would like to say a few words about Mark and his significant and deep contributions to our university. Mark has guided the university through sensitive discussions about the legacy of Alfred Deakin with senior Indigenous leaders and members of the Deakin family. These conversations resulted in the Tannerum, which was agreed to in 2023. He established the Vice-Chancellor's Indigenous Advisory Council, composed of First Nation voices from around Australia with expertise in a range of fields. And it was my great pleasure to meet with that advisory council earlier today. This advisory council provides expert advice and consultation on a range of issues and monitors the university's progress on key strategic initiatives. The Indigenous Oration, another of Mark's initiatives, is now a fixture on Deakin's annual calendar. And these are just a few of the things that he has done for us. So thank you, Mark, so much for your groundbreaking work over many years. And if I can, I'll quote your own writing back to you. You have described Deakin University in the following way. It is a tapestry of stories, and woven into that fabric is the enduring story of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples, students and families who have studied at Deakin and transformed their lives and communities. Deakin Distinguished Professor Mark Rose, you are a warrior poet. Now, the topic for tonight's Indigenous Oration is A Fair and Just Future for the First Peoples, the Social Justice Report 2025. It will be delivered by Commissioner Katie Kiss, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner. Katie Kiss commenced her role as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner on the 3rd of April 2024. She is a proud Kunju and Biri-Wiri woman who grew up in Rockhampton in central Queensland on the lands of the Darumbal people. She was previously the Executive Director of the interim Truth and Treaty body supporting Queensland's path to treaty. She has also held senior positions in the Queensland Government, including Chief of Staff to the Minister for Seniors, Disability Services and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships, as well as being Senior Advisor to the Deputy Premier. Commissioner Kiss also worked for 8 years at the Australian Human Rights Commission, where she was Director of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Justice Social Team. And most importantly, Katie is an alumni of Deakin University, where she graduated 20 years ago. So please join with me in welcoming Commissioner Katie Kiss to deliver the 2026 Deakin University Indigenous Oration.
Hello. I can't see anybody either, which is a good thing. I was saying earlier, my eyes are so bad, everything's blurry to me anyway, so it's good that I can't see anybody. Thank you, Distinguished Professor Clark, for that generous introduction. It's an honour to be here. As Matthew said, I am a proud Kanju Biri-Wiri woman from North Queensland. I was born and raised on the lands of the Darumbal people in Rockhampton and now live in Magunjan on the lands of the Yagara, Turrbal and Quandamooka peoples. But standing here on this country stirs a special feeling for me. This country and its people nurtured me on my journey as a young Aboriginal woman, a student hungry to contribute to the cause. I'd like to thank Daniel for his beautiful welcome to the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung country here in Naarm, and also to Uncle Kutcha and the young people who played with him. We do welcome to country and we do introductory ceremony like that as ceremony to welcome people to the lands on which we're meeting and gathering. But it's also to bring the spirit of the ancestors into the room so that we're having conversation and discussion that's listened to and heard in the spirit through which it's meant to be heard. So thank you, Uncle Kutcha, and the young fellas that sang with you tonight. That was deadly, and that's what elders do. They bring the young ones along with them. So thank you for that and your sharing of your truth, but also your language, your culture, and the spirit that you brought to the room tonight. Thank you. And you too, Daniel. Thank you. I pay my respects to the elders past and present who are looking after us all here today, and I extend that respect to all our elders across the many nations of First Peoples spanning this great continent. I acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people gathered here tonight, and I extend that sentiment to all non-Indigenous people who are joining us. I'd like to acknowledge and give particular attention to Chancellor Claire Higgins, Pro Vice-Chancellor, Indigenous Strategy and Innovation, Deakin Distinguished Professor Mark Rose, AM. Mark was at my graduation in 2005, 20 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying that. Caretaker, Vice-Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Research and Innovation, Deakin Distinguished Professor Matthew Clark. Former Head of Institute Career Education, Wendy Brabham. The Director of Naikiri Institute at Deakin University, Professor Corinda Burns. CEO of the Victorian Aboriginal Education Association Incorporated, Lionel Bamblett. Community leaders, allies, members of Parliament, government and service provider representatives, and other distinguished guests. But I also want to give a personal shout out to my sister Jackie Marion and the Marion family in the room here. I can't even see where Jackie's sitting. Oh, there she is up there. Thank you. And also to Auntie Monica Morgan, who I've known for many, many years, who we've had laughs with and cries with and dances with. And I'm very grateful to her and her daughter and her guest for attending tonight as well. She texted me today and told me she was coming, and it was like, oh my gosh, here we go. Also, thanks to Megan and Kylie for helping to keep me organised and getting me here tonight. Thank you for inviting me to give this Deakin University Indigenous Oration, the 5th after some exceptional individuals before me. Reflecting on the 4 orations has been both challenging and inspiring. Those who gave this oration previously asked critical questions for global humanity and the future of our nation. Miriam Rose Ungama Bowman questioned, is the nation ready for deep listening? We heard both our traditional owner and Uncle Kutcha talk about that in their welcome tonight. Stan Grant's My Lament for My Country, Where is Truth? Challenged us to look into our souls and the spirit of humanity to confront the truth of our collective shared story, to activate love, truth, healing, and justice. Tanya Hosh dared us to hope in the face of great long-lasting and ongoing oppression. And last year, that out of the way before it falls on the floor, Dr. Tom Kalmer asked us to consider, after the voice loss and election landslide, how has the landscape changed and what's on the horizon? A key theme of all those who have spoken before me is the determination of our people to rise against the disregard for the world's oldest living cultures on our own lands, by our own people, Australians, who live on our country, who have benefited from the legacy of 65,000 years of stewardship and who have denied our existence, our humanity, and our rights. I will continue this theme tonight because, as Tanya reflected in her oration, we do not have the right to give up and forego hope, or our responsibility to support fair and just futures for Australia's First Peoples. In fact, as Australians, we each have a responsibility to redirect the path of our nation from one that is built on untruths, hate, violence, inhumanity, and our social destruction, to a path that promotes unity and humanity, where, in the words of Stan Grant, we activate love, hope, healing, empathy, and justice. These were deeply considered orations, but the questions asked previously remain ever present. I feel like I've got a lot to say tonight and a lot of ground to cover, so please bear with me. I'm honoured to have been asked to follow those speakers this year, which marks the 40th anniversary of the founding of Deakin University. Deakin has a strong record of supporting First Peoples and has established and maintained relationships with our people and organisations. As a 2005 Deakin alumni, it gave me great comfort knowing that as I came from Queensland to study in Victoria, a place unfamiliar to me, that elders from this country were watching over us, physically and spiritually. I didn't get to my Year 12 graduation because I was 7 months pregnant with my first daughter. But walking across the stage to receive my degree, dressed in my academic gown and cap, and draped in my red, black, and yellow sash, I felt the weight of hope on my shoulders as a minority back then, both as an Aboriginal graduate in the mainstream and as an Aboriginal graduate in our community. But attending our second graduation ceremony at the Aboriginal Advancement League in Melbourne, surrounded by community from this country, alongside other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and having our achievements celebrated by our people, our families and friends, was a moment in my lifetime that I will never forget. I got to dance with my mother's eldest living brother that night, who, along with my mother's youngest sister, came to celebrate my achievement. My mother passed when I was 6 years old. And how deadly is it that we have growing numbers of graduates across all faculties, educators, doctors, lawyers, business owners, scientists, administrators, and artists. This oration series, which promotes and celebrates Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander excellence, voices, perspectives, and issues, is a testament to Deakin's commitment to truth-telling and its willingness to use its public profile and public spaces to promote genuine reconciliation. This includes the university's digital spaces. In preparation for this talk, I came across the pages on the Deakin website entitled Our Namesake and Deakin's Legacy, which provide a fulsome account of the life and career of Australia's second Prime Minister, Alfred Deakin, including some of the unequivocally negative aspects of his legacy. It states, Alfred Deakin's interest in the underprivileged unfortunately did not extend to Australia's First Nations peoples, as it was Deakin who was responsible for the Victorian Aboriginal Protection Amendment Act of 1886. The repercussions of that legislation were immediate and catastrophic, as families and kinship groups were torn apart, and long-term generational trauma was the inevitable result. Similar treatment is also provided at the national level, and again I quote, as Attorney General, Deakin was the chief architect of the Immigration Restriction Act of 1901, also known as the White Australia Policy. The White Australia Policy laid the foundation for a vision of Australia that was deeply damaging for positive race relations and for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The ideas around race held by Deakin and the political founders of the Federation cast a deeply damaging shadow across Australia for more than 70 years. Members of the Deakin family are here with us in the audience tonight, and I acknowledge that they are also deeply committed to truth-telling. I thank you for your courage and your generosity in supporting the public sharing of this important part of our collective story. In this day and age, when reactionary forces around the world are using mis- and disinformation and even diplomatic and financial coercion to obscure historical and contemporary realities, courageous acts of truth-telling become not only morally important, but critical to the survival of free societies. Although those who wish to obscure the truth frame truth-telling as the assignment of guilt on current generations for the acts of their forebears, this has never been the purpose. Truth-telling is not about blame. It does not ask Australians to carry guilt for the things that they did not do, but it does ask Australians to take responsibility for what happens next. It is about acknowledging the past and its role in shaping the present. It is about understanding why things are the way they are, for it is only with that knowledge that we can build trust and begin to heal and to build a fairer country together. Like Professor Rose, who was the university's first Indigenous student, I am a Deakin graduate. I know that I'm not the only Aboriginal graduate from Deakin who looks back and can see the significance of the support I was given to get through my degree. The Institute of Koori Education was one of the first Indigenous education institutions in Australia, and the first with a focus on teaching, which was at the time run by Wendy Brabham, and that got me through. I would like to thank Wendy and my social work and women's studies lecturers, Alison Haggath and Brenda Brodie, who kept me motivated and on track to complete my degree. Without their support across 10 years, I might not have made it. I was a single mum with 2 small babies. Like many of our people, I had a strong village supporting me, but I also had experienced a lot of trauma and loss from an early age. I started studying a social work degree while living in Gladstone, where there was a big community of Ike students. I did the majority of my degree back then by correspondence, with lectures sent on cassette tapes and tutorials done by Teletute. Some of you might not even know what that means. It was on the old phone sitting attached to the wall on the floor doing my teletutorials. My first year included 2-week block intensives at Warm Ponds in Geelong every 6 weeks. I started studying social work, but 1 year in, I moved to Cairns to take up a full-time job working for my people at the Cape York Land Council. So I completed the rest of my degree by correspondence. When it came to do my practical placement, my work at the Land Council was not considered appropriate to count, nor did we have paid prac allowances. With 2 small babies, I could not afford to do a 6-month unpaid placement. So Deakin allowed me to change my degree to a BA majoring in international relations. After 10 years of balancing full-time work and parenting on top of studying, and stopping and starting, I finally graduated, just beating the deadline for completion. Indigenous education institutions within our universities have played and continue to play this critical role in supporting our people to get through what can otherwise be an impossible process of getting a degree. Not because of the academic work, but because of the family and community responsibilities we have, the reality of studying without financial support from the family, and the university environments can feel culturally exclusionary at best and sometimes hostile and unsafe. Many of us are adept at walking in 2 worlds, but sustaining that at that level of intensity for years at a time is challenging. So that is all to say that I'm grateful to Deakin for the allyship which has enabled me to stand where I stand today, and which continues to provide support for the Indigenous students of today, our leaders of tomorrow. But I also want to acknowledge those in our communities who support us. While I was studying, I was also working with some phenomenal people who became my mentors and great friends, including Dr. Sophie Crichton and Noel Pearson. Having these 2 in my world was integral to building my critical thinking skills and challenging the status quo, something I believe is sorely missing in politics and society today, and I acknowledge them both tonight. It's now a little over 2 years since I was appointed to the role of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner at the Australian Human Rights Commission. Do you know how many times I have to say that a day? In saying that, I've always had a passion for social justice and human rights. But interestingly, human rights was not in the international relations curriculum when I did my degree. I have 3 key functions that are outlined in the Australian Human Rights Commission Act. They are to monitor the exercise and enjoyment of human rights by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to promote discussion, awareness and respect for the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and to examine policy and legislation to assess whether they recognise and protect the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I also have a responsibility under Section 209 of the Native Title Act to report to the Federal Attorney General about the operation of the Native Title Act and its effect on the exercise and enjoyment of rights by First Peoples. Our peoples have lived on these lands for millennia. Through culture and connection to country, we maintained stable societies and flourishing communities. However, racial violence and discrimination have undermined and interrupted that existence. Poverty and disadvantage did not fall from the sky. They are the result of colonial processes over centuries which have targeted and continue to keep Australia's First Peoples in a particular unequal social and economic position. My commitment to human rights advocacy is anchored in a belief that the human rights framework provides the possibility of a better future for our peoples. While human rights are articulated in international law and global treaties which emerged during an era of Western domination, human rights are not confined to that tradition. They belong to all of us and our collective human heritage. They are woven into First Peoples law, through our traditional ways of knowing, being and doing. Principles like self-determination, dignity and respect, and the right to culture. They shape our morality, how we treat each other, and they are the foundation upon which we can engage with the wider world, standing in our own power, on our own terms, and never compromising who we are. So why is it that over 3/4 of a century since the establishment of the United Nations, and over 3 decades on from the establishment of the Social Justice Commissioner role, our peoples are still denied justice? A founding member of the United Nations in 1948, Australia has consistently stated on the international stage that the protection and promotion of human rights is an essential component of a rules-based global order upon which lasting peace, security, freedom, and dignity for all depend. Our governments have voluntarily ratified treaties that enshrine these rights, in so doing, assuming a legal obligation to implement them through domestic measures and legislation compatible with their treaty obligations. Yet, over the course of decades, they have continually failed to summon and sustain the political will to do so. Instead, they have largely continued to treat these binding legal commitments as optional moral aspirations. They've neglected to put appropriate implementation mechanisms in place and have at times displayed open contempt for the UN scrutiny apparatus designed to keep states accountable that they voluntarily join. While Australia continues to prioritise a high level of engagement with international human rights structures, its record of following through on codification of the treaties that it's ratified is patchy at best. Where human rights protections do exist in Australia, they are fragile and vulnerable to parliamentary override, and First Peoples are disproportionately impacted by these failings. The measures taken to date to give effect to First Peoples' human rights have provided formal equality before the law, but they have not delivered substantive equality, nor have they addressed our rights to recognition, self-determination, redress for the dispossession of our country, and full restitution for the harms wrought upon us, which continue to this day. Between 1972 and 1996, Australia adopted a policy of self-determination for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, formally renouncing the policy of assimilation. This was an exciting period of progress and one in which the potential for further realisation of our human rights was put in place. Tragically, this policy was abandoned in 1996, ushering in the era of practical reconciliation. Neither practical nor reconciliatory, what this really promoted was a repudiation of First Peoples' rights, assimilation by default, and the insidious retrenchment of structural racism. Despite the rhetoric and isolated gestures of goodwill by Australian governments since then, this underlying dynamic, which acknowledges only a superficial aspect of our cultural identities, frames us in the deficit and punishes us for the outcomes it repeatedly and predictably generates, has remained stubbornly in place. The 2017 Uluru Statement from the Heart sought to create an off-ramp from this road to nowhere, a set of interdependent reforms to address our powerlessness and provide a platform for the realisation of our rights. The voice pillar, promoting a constitutionally enshrined representative structure, was the central focus of the 2023 Voice referendum. Should the referendum have succeeded, the new voice might well have shone a path ahead, a way out of the business as usual model that has undermined First Peoples' rights for more than a century. Instead, its failure has resulted in a marked spike in racism against First Peoples and a policy retreat from progressive policy. What should have been universally understood as a result strictly contained to the question of a constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament has been conflated and weaponised by bad faith actors to signal a general lack of support for Indigenous rights. But alongside these challenges is hope and determination. Today, I will speak about a fair and just future for First Peoples, which is the title of my report as the Social Justice Commissioner, my first report. This report was tabled in the Federal Parliament last month. It sets out a blueprint for a future where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples can fully and freely exercise and enjoy their human rights, and where they are supported by systems that uphold self-determination, dignity and equality, because it is only through affirming rights that we will ever close the gap. As the report and the annual reports of the Close the Gap campaign, which I co-chair, all attest, our people and organisations are leading and implementing incredible work across the country. Community-led solutions continue to deliver progress despite structural and systemic barriers. However, without comprehensive rights-affirming structures and protections, these initiatives have seldom delivered their full potential. Instead, they have struggled against the counterweight of the systemic harms that surround them, and they have been subjected to the constant risk of disestablishment. The 25 recommendations in a fair and just future for First Peoples provide a pathway for governments to move beyond rights ritualism and rhetoric, to act with integrity, and to ensure the strength, courage and determination of First Peoples is met with enabling rather than disabling structural reform and with genuine accountability. The development of this report was directly informed by the views, lived experience and aspirations of First Peoples. It was underpinned by the nationwide engagements I conducted with our communities across the country under the Informing the Agenda project. Over 10 months spanning 2024 to 25, we conducted a national survey, received submissions and held 41 engagements across all states and territories. All in all, approximately 1,600 people provided input and their voices have informed this report. At a time when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people had just recently been denied a national voice and were experiencing a significant spike in racism and attacks on their rights, Informing the Agenda provided a channel for our people to have their say and contribute to the national conversation. I want to again acknowledge all those who contributed their experiences and their knowledge so generously to inform this work. Each voice was unique, but common experiences and concerns came through very clearly. They included the increased exposure to racism in all aspects of their lives, physical, structural, and online, concern for the systematic attack on our children and young people and increasing numbers of deaths in custody as a result of the dehumanisation and criminalisation of our people, and the lack of accountability to the myriad of recommendations made for generations before. Let me share some of what we heard from participants, and I quote, "Access to country is access to culture. Access to culture is access to language and the stories and the ability to pass it on. After the referendum, Indigenous issues just vanished from the conversation. We can't escape it. Racism is everywhere. Progressing voice, treaty and truth and the goals of the Uluru Statement of the Heart remain relevant and key to improve outcomes for our peoples. Truth-telling and historical acceptance is key to reconciliation in Australia. Historical acceptance means that all Australians recognise, understand and accept the wrongs of the past and the impact of these wrongs on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples still felt today. Poverty is a big one. We're supposed to live in one of the richest countries in the world, yet our mob live in third world conditions, and that has to be addressed. There is no focus on the structures driving these problems. Instead, blame is placed on the affected individual. We are the lived experience experts with the ability to provide an analysis of the oppressions that are being faced by our community, and our voices are crucial in shaping policies. Transforming government is critical to closing the gap and achieving better outcomes for First Nations community. Governments must share power, invest in communities and follow through on their promises. We haven't seen shared decision-making. Funding agreements don't meet the needs of our communities. Native title is still part of their system. It still prioritises colonial rights over traditional. How do we hold Australian institutions accountable? There must be consequences for non-compliance. We need to use what resources, legislation, and international agreements available to support our case for positive change, and we must stop politicians from politicising our youth, women, and men for their own political agendas. The findings of the report span 8 chapters, including a chapter on the outcomes of the Informing the Agenda project, which has also been produced as a standalone document, a second chapter that outlines a comprehensive blueprint for change, and 6 thematic chapters covering First Peoples participation, the full enjoyment of rights by First Peoples, systemic integrity and accountability, rebuilding the village and justice for First Peoples, and land justice. I will discuss each of these in turn briefly. With regard to participation, it's not only a human right, it is a prerequisite for democratic legitimacy and effective policy outcomes. When I spoke to communities around the country, people were unanimous in their sentiment that it is the communities who hold the solution, and in the conviction that they were not to be silenced. In my report, I highlight some key areas where our people and organisations such as the Towards Truth Unit at the UNSW Indigenous Law Centre and the Centre for Indigenous People and Work at UTS, sorry about talking about 2 different universities, to name just 2 of many, are leading the way to ensure that evidence about our participation and experiences provided by us and that our findings are being communicated to policymakers. The 2017 Uluru Statement reflected a near universal acknowledgement within our communities about the need for national truth-telling, representation and agreement-making arrangements. My report's recommendations reiterate those calls for a national representative mechanism and a national Makarrata Commission with the mandate and powers to conduct a national truth-telling process and to design a national agreement-making process. First Peoples must be able to participate fully and freely in decisions that affect us. We are still here. We are rights holders. The 2023 referendum did not change that. But also enabling and facilitating the full participation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is not only beneficial to First Peoples and our communities locally. In ensuring the participation of the most vulnerable communities, all Australians have their participation rights further understood, respected and protected. While we have seen the erosion of First Peoples representation and the disestablishment of truth and treaty processes in Queensland and the Northern Territory, the experience and knowledge gained through advancing these processes has not been lost. It has informed processes in other parts of the country, and it will inform future process in these jurisdictions when the tide ultimately turns against the racist populism of the current moment. Amidst the disappointment of these setbacks, there is even greater cause for celebration of the momentous wins for voice, treaty and truth elsewhere. Progress has been made in the ACT with its elected body, in South Australia with the Voice, in New South Wales with its Treaty Commission, and most notably here in Victoria with the passing of Australia's historic first treaty legislation underpinned by the Yurruk Justice Commission statewide truth-telling process. Nonetheless, while these jurisdictions are leading the way, the absence of a national representative body for First Peoples, such as those previously in place in the form of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission, or ATSIC, and the National Congress of Australia's First Peoples, has left us without a mechanism to support national collective engagement on critical issues of concern, the determination of priorities, and the development of solutions that meet our needs. While we are seeing record numbers of First Peoples holding seats in federal and state and territory parliaments and other participatory mechanisms established, existing mechanisms for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander participation at the national level, from parliamentary presence and advisory roles to partnership structures and representative bodies, are conditional, fragile, or government controlled. In short, they are inadequate, and the Australian government knows this. When the leadership made the case for the voice to Parliament, they characterised the no vote as a vote for the status quo that we all know isn't working. With this context in mind, it's hard to stomach the lack of action taken since the failed referendum to address this dysfunction. Indeed, active pursuit of the three pillars of the Uluru Statement, voice, treaty and truth, has ground to a halt. Despite the potential for positive progress to be made from these foundational pillars, the message is loud and clear that with respect to Indigenous affairs, closing the gap, which continues to fail against the vast majority of its targets, is now the government's almost singular focus. However, as I stated earlier, it's only through affirming First Peoples human rights that we will ever close the gap, and this is why my report calls for a National Human Rights Act and a National Action Plan to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In 2026, Australia's lack of a National Bill of Rights or Human Rights Act has left it an outlier among Western liberal democracies. At a time when we are seeing major challenges to human rights institutions and norms globally, this deficit leaves all Australians, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, without comprehensive and functioning safeguards in place. It is incredulous that in a country like Australia, First Peoples have no other choice but to resort to court challenges or international avenues to seek redress or even the basic recognition of their rights. While the absence of domestic remedies for human rights breaches is nothing to celebrate, it has been inspiring to see our people taking action through UN complaints processes, many with limited access to resources. These include 2 complaints to the Human Rights Committee, Daniel Billy and others versus Australia, concerning failures by Australia to act on climate change and its impact in the Torres Strait, and Alsa Roy and Wananayapali Indigenous Peoples versus Australia concerning procedural rights in determinations regarding traditional territory. And 2 early warning and urgent action procedure requests to the Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. The first was in relation to the WA cultural heritage legislation following the destruction of 46,000-year-old Jukan Gorge rock shelters. The other concerned the state of youth justice laws, policy and state agency conduct. Sadly, the Australian government is showing little effort to rectify this and appears to feel no shame in response to the international condemnation it has received. Its response to addressing human rights failings, identified in its 4th Universal Periodic Review by the United Nations Human Rights Council, was exceptionally disappointing. Through the UPR, which takes place every 5 years, other countries conduct a peer review on Australia's performance against its human rights commitments. While they acknowledge positive developments, they also make recommendations to Australia for action to better protect human rights. Of 332 recommendations, the Australian government accepted only 128, or about 39%, the lowest rate of acceptance by an Australian government since the UPR process began 20 years ago. On average, other countries accept approximately 73 to 76% of all recommendations received. The recommendations that were accepted were restricted to measures already underway, and notably recommendations to make the government more accountable on the quality and delivery of accepted recommendations were not supported. Among the recommendations which were not accepted by the government were calls for Australia to establish a national action plan to implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Declaration stands as the most comprehensive international instrument on the rights of Indigenous peoples. While some will argue otherwise, the Declaration does not give rise to any new or additional rights for Indigenous peoples. Rather, it contextualises existing human rights standards and fundamental freedoms as they apply to the specific circumstances and situations of Indigenous peoples. 17 years on from the endorsement of the Declaration by Australia in 2009, Australia is yet to progress national implementation of the Declaration and its internationally accepted standards in a comprehensive or effective way. In November 2023, the Joint Standing Committee on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Affairs delivered its report on the application of the Declaration in Australia. It made 6 recommendations, including that Australia establish a national action plan to implement the Declaration. Over 2 years later, the government is yet to respond. These examples speak to what I have identified as a profound and growing lack of government accountability. A lack of accountability not just to uphold Australian government's international human rights obligations, but to ensure that their laws and policies align with their homegrown commitments under the National Partnership Agreement on Closing the Gap, which is failing to track against 15 of 19 targets, including 4 of which are worsening. My report argues that until the governance of governments is recalibrated so that governments are held to the same level of accountability they impose on others, progress against these priorities will be critically impeded. I've made a number of recommendations to address this, including calls for independent monitoring and rights-based performance requirements for states and territories under Closing the Gap, and transparent, effective, needs-based funding arrangements. I've also recommended the implementation of the National Anti-Racism Framework, which the Australian Government commissioned but has failed to act upon over the last 2 years. This failure to act has been sustained even amidst escalating racism across the country, including the ongoing racism experienced by First Peoples and its extreme and sickening manifestation in the attack on Camp Sovereignty not too far from here, and the attempted massacre, the allegedly racially motivated terrorist attack at Bulu on Survival Day earlier this year. While a National Senate inquiry or parliamentary inquiry into racism, hate and violence directed at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is currently underway, I and the Race Discrimination Commissioner, Giri Sivaraman, have stressed the need for action, not more recommendations that sit on a shelf for decades gathering dust unimplemented. It is in this context that I've also requested a formal public and timely response by the Australian Government to my report's recommendations, and it's my hope that as a step towards better accountability, this request is met. As former Indigenous Affairs Minister Ken Wyatt has said, the test ahead will be for governments to choose implementation over rhetoric, accountability over aspiration, and justice over complacency. And of course, it will be a test for all of us to vote in governments who are prepared and equipped to make that choice. While we must work with governments and continue to demand accountability, we must not make the fatal error of waiting for government to recognise and give effect to our rights. Those who came before us didn't wait. They established community organisations to respond to exclusionary policies that denied access to health, housing, education and justice. They resisted oppression and discrimination as we continue to today. For First Peoples, if we are to progress towards a common purpose for a future that is strengths-based, self-determining and sustainable for our peoples, we need to live and breathe our collective rights as peoples, re-establish ways of working together to re-centre respect for senior eldership and cultural authority, and to focus on rebuilding our villages which ground our people in our cultures and our obligations to kin and country, that provide solid foundations for our young people to develop independence, but provide support when needed and lift us up when we are struggling. Expose young people to the older generations talking, planning and coordinating, and which slowly and organically build the capacity of future generations. Connect First Peoples from across Australia and across the globe to come together respectfully and with a unity of purpose to share knowledge and advocate for our rights, and instill in us the resolve to never compromise on our rights. And this we are already doing. We're doing it through the language revival initiatives of organisations such as the First Languages Australia, the Living First Language Platform, the Murrumbidgee Aboriginal Language and Culture Cooperative, and the Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre. We're doing it through peacemaking and dispute and conflict resolution programs, such as those run by Yolngu leaders, the Darwin Township Leadership Council, Deadly Indigenous Youth Doing Good, and the Anandili-Aqua Groot Peacemaker Program. And we're doing it through an Indigenous nation building, undertaken by the like of the Ngarli-Wangu Regional Authority, the Gulgabada Nation, and the Southern West Wiradjuri clans. We are doing it in so many ways, but we need to be doing it more and we need to be doing it everywhere. Like First Peoples the world over, we must think, act and live as individual and collective nations regardless of whether or not governments or others choose to recognise and support us. We must develop a united front on our own terms. My report recommends that Australian governments prioritise sustained and long-term funding to support community-led initiatives to assist us to rebuild strong and thriving First Peoples communities. Indeed, they have an obligation to do so under our rights to self-determination, participation, respect and protection of culture, and equality and non-discrimination. But self-determination requires that we, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, must take the lead. The final 2 chapters of my report concern the ongoing denial of access to justice experienced by First Peoples, which colonisation has entrenched. A key challenge for Australians today is the cost of living. But what is the cost of living for First Peoples in Australia, and how is that experience different to non-Indigenous Australians? The cost of being born Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander in a community that seeks to erase us, dehumanises and criminalises us, and commits racist violence against us. There is no mystery as to why we are needing to rebuild our villages. Settler colonial governments sanctioned the dismantling of Indigenous governance and cultural authority, our legal systems, our kinship structures, and our connections to country, culture, language, family, and community. These injustices inflicted on our peoples, the invasion of our country, the taking of our lives, the theft of our children, the denial of our sovereignty, and the denigration of our culture. And these are not just historic. They live on within us, manifesting as intergenerational trauma. They live on within the structures and systems that govern our lives today, structures and systems which have proven unable to acknowledge and accommodate the distinct needs and realities of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, both as distinct cultural groups and as survivors of the colonial experience. While we stand proud as members of 2 of the eldest continuing cultures in the world, the cost of living for us, even those who have succeeded in navigating the 2 worlds, is great. As is the case for Indigenous populations around the world who have suffered similar treatment, the exposure of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to the criminal justice system is at crisis point. We experience contact with the criminal justice system as both offenders and victims at much higher rates than non-Indigenous Australians. Overrepresentation occurs at every stage of the system. Initial contact, often through over-policing, leads to higher charging rates, greater likelihood of being denied bail, and increased time spent on remand. Each stage compounds the next. What begins as disproportionate exposure to the system results in disproportionate incarceration and unacceptable deaths of our people in custody and other institutional or carceral settings. In relation to the latter, my report recommends that the Australian Government refer to the Australian Law Reform Commission an inquiry into the conduct of police and coronial investigations into Indigenous deaths and critical incidents in custody across Australia to identify a best practice approach. Tragically, it's not just our adults. Our children are being increasingly exposed to these systems as a direct result of political decisions, laws, policies, and practices. Our children are 26 times more likely to be in detention than non-Indigenous children. And in the Northern Territory, this rate has increased at times to 100% of children in detention being Aboriginal. The tough on crime policy approaches targeting children which have been adopted by state and territory governments in recent years, including here in Victoria, are inconsistent with both Australian human rights obligations and with identified outcomes of the National Agreement on Closing the Gap. Locking up children does not reduce crime, nor does it curb the transition from youth detention to a life of adult incarceration. Evidence-based, community-led and adequately funded prevention and early intervention approaches that centre family and child wellbeing and the best interests of children must be the focus. In light of current political debate and law reform, we must continue to affirm culture as a protective factor for children and young people. It's not separate to or an add-on, nor is it contrary to promoting safety. In fact, it is integral to the overall health, well-being and positive development of First Peoples, and access to culture is our right. My report calls for national leadership on the establishment and implementation of appropriate standards and protections concerning child safety and youth justice interventions, as well as key reforms including raising the age of criminal responsibility and banning solitary confinement for children. I've also called for measures to strengthen media accountability and promote accurate reporting of youth justice issues, which are too often misrepresented, fueling populist responses that might win votes but fail to keep the broader community or our children safe. The final chapter of my report, Land Justice, is land justice. For First Peoples, land is not just a resource, it's the foundation of identity, culture, health and well-being. Without land justice, the full enjoyment of other rights is impossible. We are now fast approaching the post-determination era, with native title determinations covering approximately 55.4% of the continent's landmass. And as of 30th of June last year, over 1,500 Indigenous land use agreements had been negotiated. Of the 19 closing the gap targets, those relating to access to country are 2 which are on track. The time and effort that's gone into securing these milestones is monumental, and what has been achieved is a testament to our peoples. However, like many reports that have gone before it, my report finds that the current legal frameworks, including native title and cultural heritage protections, are complex, discriminatory, inadequate, and they fail to align with international human rights standards. The report discusses a number of recent High Court cases, the most significant of which are Timber Creek, the first determination by the High Court on native title compensation, and Commonwealth v Yunupingu, which established that, as is the case with any other property right, if the Commonwealth removes the rights of native title holders, they are entitled to just terms compensation. Aligned with the recommendations of the Australian Law Reform Commission report on the Future Acts regime, which was tabled on the same day as my report, I've called for comprehensive reform of land justice systems in partnership with First Peoples. This includes amendment of the Native Title Act to ensure consistency with Australia's international human rights obligations and to address long-standing concerns about the Act, which is, in its current form, unfit to meet those aims spelled out in its preamble. That is, to rectify the consequences of past injustices and ensure that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples receive the full recognition and status their prior and ongoing rights and interests fully entitle them to aspire. A fair and just future for First Peoples is possible. The evidence in my report shows the innovation, strengths and success of solutions created by First Peoples to address challenges affecting their communities. Governments must demonstrate meaningful action through collaborating with First Peoples and to upholding dignity, courage and determination of First Peoples with structural reform, genuine accountability and integrity. Lest you think me naive, while I wholeheartedly believe this future is possible, we all need to accept that the fulfilment and protection of our rights is, always has been and always will be an ongoing struggle. And by we, I'm not just talking about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I'm talking about all of us. When I talk about genuine allyship, what I am really speaking of is solidarity. None of us can afford to be complacent. If we want to see a better future, then we must build it. And if we are to meet the challenges ahead, an attack on the rights of any of us needs to be understood as an attack on the rights of all of us. Dr. Lilla Watson summed this up best when she said, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." Over the past decade, we've seen the world change dramatically. The comfortable illusion that the force of progress is pulling us ever upwards towards a more enlightened, more humane future has been dispelled. We have a sheer climb ahead, but one we can surmount if we unite and focus our energies on securing firm footholds. No longer must we only walk alongside one another. Together, we must rise. Thank you.
Katie, thank you so much for that. And it's wonderful to have that link back to your days at Ike. And in recognising it, my very first speech at Deakin when I returned, been a frequent flyer as people know, but my very first speech, I said that everywhere I've gone in my career, I've seen Ike students excel, whether it is at SIC or Congress or Voice, and most of all at UNDRIP. And I remember you very much in New York at the carousel where we had a big conversation. So Katie, again, thank you very much. Give Katie a big hand. And we know that the flagship for Indigenous education is very much Ike and Naikiri. And mentioning Wendy, that was really good of you to do that, because that baton is now being passed to Corinda over there and Natasha and the Naikiri team. So let's give them a big hand too. Before I call up the final performance for tonight, I want to recognise Ian and Fiona, who are not here, but they were the sponsor of this oration, so I want to recognise them. I also want to recognise Amanda and Jess, who try and manage me, so thank you for the efforts you make. I want to recognise the Black Crimson group at Harvard, who will be watching this on delay, leadership group that I participated in over at Boston early in September. Oh, no, February, it was so very cold. And I also want to recognise the events team, and Megan and Kylie, thank you for the work you've done, your whole team, to bringing this together. It's been great to work with you over all the orations over the years. And finally, I'm going to call Leonie, and I'm trying to work out who's going to perform with Leonie. Someone called Brad Riddle. Sorry, Brad Brown. Sorry, did I get that wrong? Sorry, Brad. I did it on purpose. As I pass to the final performance, Daniel, thank you for staying, and may those ancestral spirits that you summon, you're welcome tonight, get us all home safely. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to our oration tonight. Katie, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leo. I'm a proud Barkindji Wiradjuri woman from far western New South Wales. I grew up in Newcastle on a Wabaka country. Up until 2018, I made the move down here to beautiful Naarm. Been here for 8 years. Just like to acknowledge that we're on sacred Wurundjeri country this evening, and I pay my respects to their elders and their ancestors, and also their children, because they are the future elders, future caretakers. And also further extend that respect to any mob in the room, and also everyone that's here tonight. What? Not yet. There's the sound. I'm going to play just one little song to wrap up the night. This is called Keep Going. And I wrote this as a bit of a just going into battle of life. You know, we can go through some very dark times, but I guess the message that I want to portray is just to keep going. You've got the strength. Yeah, this is Keep Going. Fight the way
believe you. You've got the strength and power to keep going. Keep going, keep going. Here's for the first steps, and I'll take the last. Life has been molded from the things of the past that you soared, that you enjoyed. Yeah, I'm not perfect and I'm flawed, but I'm rising. I got my wings now, like a phoenix. I'm a queen now. Sing to my inner child. You walk through wildfire. Fight the wind, I believe you. You've got the strength and power to keep going. Keep going, keep Keep going. Keep going. Keep Thank you. This is Brad Brown. I've been Leo. Stay warm. Thank you.